The cargo ship Baiko was 3 days out from the frontier when Yuna threw a wrench at Dawan's head. She missed on purpose. Probably. The wrench bounced off the wall behind him and clattered across the floor of the engine room. Dawan didn't even blink. He just picked it up, set it on the workbench, and walked away. "You're cooking tonight," Yuna called after him. "I did it yesterday and the day before that." "I don't cook," Dawan said. "Then you don't eat." This was life aboard the Baiko. 6 crew members, 1 old ship, and a cargo hold full of medical supplies, heading to a small human colony called New Busan on the far edge of known space. It was a boring run, the kind of job where the hardest decision was who made dinner. Captain Taeho sat in the bridge, feet on the console, reading a report he had already read twice. He was a calm man with tired eyes and steady hands. He had served in the military before becoming a cargo captain, and the switch had been easy for him. He preferred quiet. He preferred routine. He preferred things going exactly as planned. Behind him, Hana sat cross-legged in her chair, whispering alien words into a language program. She was the ship's communications officer and translator. She spoke 11 alien languages already and was learning a 12th because, as she put it, she had nothing better to do. She was small and sharp-tongued, and most aliens who met her remembered her voice long after they forgot her face. Nari, the pilot, was asleep in her chair with her boots on the navigation panel. She flew the ship like a woman who didn't believe in gravity, and she slept like someone who had never once worried about anything. Minho, the medic, was in the medbay counting supplies and humming a song nobody recognized. The last ordinary day any of them would ever have. The Baiko dropped out of faster-than-light travel near New Busan right on schedule. Nari woke up, stretched, and reached for the communication controls to hail the colony. She sent the standard greeting. Then she waited. Nothing came back. She sent it again. Nothing. No voice, no signal, no beacon. The colony's communication array was silent. Taeho sat up straight. He looked at the screen, then at Nari, then at Hana. "Check the frequencies," he said. Hana scanned everything. Every channel, every band, every emergency frequency. There was nothing. New Busan was a colony of 40,000 people. 40,000 people don't go quiet. "Take us in," Taeho said. Nari brought the Baiko into low orbit. The planet turned slowly below them, brown and dusty, with a wide valley where the colony was supposed to be. Except the colony wasn't there anymore. Where New Busan had been, there was only black earth and craters. The buildings were gone. The landing pads were gone. The greenhouses, the water treatment plant, the school, the hospital, all gone. Burned down to nothing. 40,000 people had lived there that morning. Now there was only ash. Nobody on the bridge spoke. Hana put her hand over her mouth. Nari gripped the controls so hard her knuckles turned white. Dawan, who had come to the bridge when the silence started, stood completely still, his face empty. Minho found the distress beacon buried in the wreckage. It had been recorded by a woman in the colony's last minutes. Her voice was shaking but clear. She said the attackers came without warning. Warships in orbit. Velshi warships. They carried the crest of Warlord Tarn. They fired on the colony from space. There was no demand, no warning, no communication. Just fire. The recording ended with the sound of an explosion and then silence. In the galaxy, there was a thing called the Galactic Union. It was a massive coalition of over 300 alien species. They had existed for thousands of years. They had rules, rankings, and a system for everything. Every species was given a threat index, a number that told the rest of the galaxy how dangerous they were. Humans had joined the galactic community about 60 years ago. They were classified as Tier 9, which meant low priority. The classification was based on human biology: soft skin, no natural weapons, short lifespan, average strength. In the eyes of the Union, Humans were noisy, emotional, unremarkable creatures who had somehow built spaceships. They were tolerated, but not respected. The Velshi were a warrior species, insectoid, armored, and brutal. Warlord Tarn commanded a fleet of 200 warships and had conquered dozens of smaller species. To him, raiding a human colony was nothing. It was like stepping on an insect. A Tier 9 species on a forgotten frontier world was not worth a second thought. On the Union capital world, a reptilian diplomat named Roka received a short report about the attack. He read it, classified it as a minor territorial incident, and moved on. When asked if someone should inform the humans formally, he said it was not necessary for a species of their classification. A small trader named Nyx, who belonged to a timid species called the Felmi, and who had lived among humans for years, watched the Council's public broadcast from his ship. His hands were shaking. He tried to send a message to the Union Council. He tried to tell them they were making a terrible mistake. Nobody answered. Nyx sat alone in his ship, staring at the screen, and whispered to himself, "They have no idea what they've just done." Back on the Baco, Tejo stood at the center of the bridge and looked at the burned world below. He did not shout. He did not cry. His voice was low and even when he spoke. "Hana, get me a line to Earth." The message went out. The response came back faster than anyone expected. It was short. It read, "Message received. Hold position. Fleet is already moving." Yuna frowned. "How are they moving already? We just reported it." Hana pulled up a tactical feed and went pale. Across dozens of star systems, every human ship, military, cargo, civilian, private, was changing course. Not because they had been ordered to, because they had all heard the same distress beacon. The woman's voice, the explosions, the silence. They were all moving toward the frontier, thousands of ships, without orders. Hana translated the flood of intercepted human transmissions into a single line for the alien communication logs. Her voice was barely a whisper. "They're all saying the same thing. We're coming." In the 3 days after New Busan burned, something strange began happening across the galaxy. Nobody wanted to hear what a frightened little alien had to say about humans. On his 4th try, he managed to speak with a junior aide who worked for Elder Prell, the ancient head of the council. Nyx grabbed the aide by the arm and spoke fast. "You need to listen to me. I have lived among humans for 11 years. I know them. You need to understand what is coming." The aide looked uncomfortable. "The human situation is being monitored." "You are not monitoring anything," Nyx said. "You are ignoring everything. Humans do not react to death the way other species do. They do not calculate losses and move on. They remember every face, every name, every child, and then they come for you. Together." The aide thanked him politely, wrote nothing down, and walked away. Nyx stood alone in the hallway of the Union capital, and felt the weight of what was coming settle onto his shoulders like a stone. Meanwhile, aboard the Baco, Tejo received new orders. A fleet was assembling 2 systems away from Velshi-controlled space, and the Baco was to join a forward scout group. Tejo was given a field commission, acting commander of the scouts. He pinned the small rank insignia to his jacket, without ceremony, and went back to work. The crew prepared in their own ways. Yuna spent 18 straight hours in the engine room. She pushed the reactor past its safety limits, rewired half the power grid, and somehow made the old ship faster than it had any right to be. When Minho asked if the modifications were safe, she grinned and said, "Probably not." Dowen cleaned his weapons. He had a modified railgun he had built himself, a brutal thing that could punch through armored walls. He sat in the cargo bay, disassembling and reassembling it in perfect silence, over and over, until his hands could do it with his eyes closed. Minho stocked the medbay with everything he had. Then he did something nobody expected. He downloaded the complete biological files on the Velshi species. Their anatomy, their weak points, where their armor was thinnest, where their nervous system was most exposed. He did not download these files to help them. Nari ran combat flight simulations until her hands shook. Then she ran them again. She flew the simulated Baiko through impossible scenarios, outnumbered, outgunned, surrounded, and won most of them through sheer recklessness. The simulation program flagged her maneuvers as suicidal. She took it as a compliment. She sat at her communication station and began broadcasting on open Velshi military frequencies, in their own language, a single repeating message: "Return our dead, or join them." She sent it every hour, on the hour, without emotion, without variation. The first Velshi officer to hear it laughed. The 10th one stopped laughing. The human fleet assembled at the staging point, and it was not what anyone in the galaxy expected. There was no grand armada, no matching warships in perfect formation. What arrived was a strange and furious collection of everything humanity could throw into space. There were proper military vessels, yes, cruisers, destroyers, frigates from the Terran Navy. But alongside them came armed cargo haulers with weapons welded to their hulls, mining ships with their rock-cutting lasers pointed forward, private yachts armored with scrap metal and determination, research vessels whose scientists had volunteered for combat duty. It looked like chaos. It looked like a mess. Alien intelligence officers watching from a distance reported that the human fleet had no unified command structure, no standard equipment, and no apparent strategy. They were wrong about the last part. The fleet held a war council. Every captain had a voice. They argued. They shouted over each other. They insulted each other's ships, each other's plans, and each other's mothers. It was loud and messy and completely undisciplined by galactic standards. And then, in under 6 hours, they produced a unified battle plan that accounted for every single ship's unique strengths and weaknesses. The modified cargo ships would serve as heavy hitters. The mining vessels would cut through enemy armor. The research ships would handle electronic warfare. The military vessels would lead the assault. It was brilliant, and it worked on paper. While the fleet prepared, Nick sat alone on his small ship and did what no one else in the galaxy had bothered to do. He wrote a report, a real one. He compiled everything he had learned about humans in 11 years of living among them, eating their food, learning their customs, and listening to their stories. He wrote about how humans were persistent predators, built to chase prey across entire continents until it collapsed from exhaustion. He wrote about how they bonded with everything, other humans, aliens, animals, even machines, and would fight to the death for those bonds. He wrote about how they adapted faster than any species in the galactic record, not through evolution, but through pure stubborn creativity. He wrote about their rage, not the cold, logical aggression of most predator species, but a hot, directed, creative fury that fed on love as much as anger. He wrote about their history, thousands of years of war. Humans had fought each other with sticks, with swords, with guns, with bombs that could crack a planet. They had more experience with organized violence than any species in the galaxy. They had simply never turned that experience outward before. Nobody had given them a reason. Until now. Nix finished his report. His hands were shaking. The final line read, "The Velshi killed 40,000 humans. There are 18 billion more, and every single one of them is angry." He sent the report to every Union Council member. None of them read it. Far away in Velshi space, Warlord Tarn received word that a human fleet was approaching. He sat on his command throne, surrounded by his officers, and laughed. His advisors pulled up the human species file. Tier 9, low priority, no significant military capability. He had conquered species with 10 times the military power of these soft little creatures. He gave the order to meet the human fleet in open space. He wanted it done quickly. He wanted it to serve as an example to every other minor species that might think about challenging the Velshi. He told his officers, "They are soft creatures who cry over their dead. This will be over in hours." On the bridge of the Bekho, Teho watched the Velshi fleet appear on the long-range sensors. 200 warships, arranged in perfect formation, moving with the confidence of a species that had never truly lost. Darwin stood beside him. "That's a lot of ships." Teho's face didn't change. "That's not enough," he said. And behind the Bekho, stretching across the darkness of space like a wave of light and metal and fury, the human fleet moved forward. The two fleets met in a region of space called the Hollow, a dark stretch between two nebulae where sensor range was short and gravity pulled in strange directions. Tarn had chosen it because it favored large formations. His 200 warships spread into a wide crescent, a classic Velshi tactic designed to wrap around the enemy and crush them from all sides. It had worked against every species he had ever fought. The human fleet did not form a line. It did not arrange itself into any recognizable formation at all. Instead, it broke apart. Dozens of small groups, wolf packs, the captains called them, scattered across the battlefield like sparks from a fire. Each group was a mix of warships, armed civilian vessels, and support craft. They moved fast, they moved unpredictably, and they hit the Velshi crescent at 20 different points at the same time. Tarn's first officer reported the human movements with confusion in his voice. "They are attacking everywhere at once." Tarn clicked his mandibles in amusement. "Disorganized, desperate. Sweep them aside." But the Velshi crescent, designed to trap a single enemy force, could not trap 20 separate forces moving in 20 different directions. The wolf packs tore into the formation like teeth into flesh. Aboard the Bekho, Nari flew like a woman possessed. She dove the old cargo ship through a gap in the Velshi line that shouldn't have been wide enough, rolling sideways to avoid a blast that burned the paint off the hull. Una screamed adjustments from the engine room. "Port shields now. Transfer power from life support. We don't need to breathe for 30 seconds. The ship shuddered and groaned, and somehow held together. Hana sat at her station with her eyes closed, listening. She had tapped into Velshi communication frequencies and was translating their battle orders in real time. Every time Tarn issued a command, Hana heard it. She fed the information to the wolf packs. The humans knew what the Velshi were going to do before they did it. Tarn ordered his left wing to close the gap. The humans were already moving. He ordered his reserves forward. The humans hit them from the side. Every move he made was countered within minutes, sometimes within seconds. It was like fighting an enemy that could read his mind. On the other side of the battle, Darwin led a boarding party onto a crippled Velshi destroyer. The airlock blew open, and 12 humans poured into the ship. The Velshi were bigger, stronger, and covered in natural armor plating. In a fair fight, one Velshi soldier was worth 3 humans. Darwin did not fight fair. His team moved through the ship like ghosts. They hacked the internal doors, sealing Velshi soldiers into compartments and venting the atmosphere. They ripped into the ship's power lines and killed the lights, then used night vision to hunt in the darkness. When a group of Velshi cornered them in a corridor, Darwin triggered the fire suppression system, filling the hall with freezing chemical foam that blinded the Velshi's compound eyes. Then his team walked through the foam and finished the fight. The Velshi captain of the destroyer sent a final message before his ship went dark. They fight like nothing we have ever seen. They do not follow rules. They do not follow logic. They follow anger. Back in open space, Tarn watched his fleet begin to break apart. He could not understand it. These were Tier 9 creatures, soft, weak, emotional. They should have shattered at the first volley. Instead, they were adapting. Every tactic he used worked once, and only once. The second time, the humans had already figured out the counter. They were learning faster than his officers could adjust. Individual human ships did things that defied military logic. A damaged frigate placed itself between a Velshi warship and a crippled civilian vessel, absorbing fire until the civilians could retreat. A tiny yacht, barely armed, rammed itself into a Velshi destroyer's engine section and crippled it. The pilot ejected at the last second and was picked up by a passing cargo hauler that didn't even slow down. The humans were not fighting like soldiers. They were fighting like a family. Tarn made his decision. He identified the largest human warship, a heavy cruiser called the Jirasan, and ordered every ship within range to concentrate fire on it. Destroy the biggest ship, break their spirit. It was the oldest tactic in war. The Jirasan took hit after hit. Its shields failed. Its hull cracked open in 3 places. Fires burned through half its decks. Any rational commander would have surrendered or retreated. The captain of the Jirasan did neither. She turned her dying ship directly toward Tarn's command carrier. The engines burned at full power, pushing the broken cruiser forward on a collision course. Tarn's officers screamed warnings. Defensive batteries fired everything they had. It wasn't enough. The Jirasan hit Tarn's carrier at full speed. The impact tore through both ships. The carrier's main systems went offline. Its weapons went silent. Its engines died. And in that moment of silence, when the Velshi fleet looked at their crippled flagship and hesitated, the wolf packs closed in from every direction. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, 142 Velshi warships were destroyed. 31 were captured. 27 fled into deep space. The human fleet had lost 40% of its ships. A terrible cost. But every surviving crew was already repairing damage, welding armor, and preparing to move forward. Nobody talked about going home. Dowan dragged Warlord Tarn from the wreckage of his carrier personally. Tarn was injured, bleeding from cracks in his armor, and his compound eyes were wide with something no Velshi had felt in generations. Fear. They brought him to the Bekos brig. Tejo stood on the other side of the bars and looked at the warlord who had burned 40,000 people alive. Tarn stared back. His voice was quiet and broken when he spoke. "What are you?" Tejo's expression did not change. "We're what happens when you hurt our people." Across the galaxy, the news spread like fire. A Tier 9 species had destroyed a Velshi warfleet. Not with advanced technology, not with superior numbers, not with some secret weapon, with anger, creativity, and the complete refusal to stop fighting. On the Union capital world, Roka stared at the casualty reports and felt his blood go cold. The Union's own military had never defeated a Velshi fleet of that size without at least 5 species working together. The humans had done it alone, with half their ships being civilian vessels held together with welding wire and stubbornness. Elder Prell called an emergency council session. The chamber was full for the first time in years. Every species wanted to know the same thing. How were humans classified as Tier 9? Someone asked. The answer came from the classification archives. Humans had been assessed based on individual biology. One human alone was not impressive. Soft skin, no claws, no venom, no armor, average strength, short lifespan. On paper, a single human was one of the least threatening creatures in the galaxy. Nobody had ever assessed what happened when you put billions of them together and made them all angry at the same time. Mix finally got his audience. He stood before the full council, a tiny Felmy among hundreds of towering alien diplomats, and spoke in a voice that did not shake. "I tried to warn you. I sent messages. I wrote reports. I begged for meetings. None of you listened. And now you sit here asking how this happened." He paused. "Humans are not dangerous because of what they are. They are dangerous because of what they do when you give them a reason." The chamber was silent. On the Baiko, Tejo received a message from the Union, the first formal communication they had ever sent directly to humanity. It requested an immediate ceasefire and dialogue. Tejo read it. He looked at his crew. Yuna had grease on her face and burns on her hands. Dawan had blood on his boots that wasn't his. Hana's eyes were red from hours of concentration. Nari was already plotting the next course. Minho was in the medbay, stitching up wounds and quietly telling everyone they were idiots. Tejo told Hana to send a reply. She asked what to say. Tell them we'll talk when we're finished. The human fleet did not stop after the hollow. It pushed deeper into Velshi space, and the galaxy watched in stunned silence as something no one had predicted began to unfold. The humans were not just destroying, they were liberating. Every world the Velshi had conquered, every population they had enslaved, every species they had crushed under their armored feet. The humans freed them as they advanced. On the first liberated world, a mining colony, where a small reptilian species had been worked nearly to extinction, Minho set up a field hospital within hours of landing. He treated wounds that were years old. He gave food to creatures who had forgotten what it tasted like to eat without fear. The freed aliens stared at the humans with wide, unbelieving eyes. In their experience, stronger species took. That was the rule of the galaxy. Nobody had ever come to give something back. Hana broadcast messages on every frequency, in every language she knew. You are free. You are safe. We are not here to rule you. We are here because what was done to you was wrong. On the second world, a group of freed slaves asked Nari why the humans were helping them. Nari shrugged and said, because someone should. Word spread among the liberated species faster than the fleet could travel. By the time the humans reached the third world, the slaves had already overthrown their Velshi guards. They stood in the ruins of their chains and waited for the human ships, with something none of them had felt in generations: hope. This terrified the Galactic Union more than the military victories. Roka stood before the council and said what everyone was thinking. Humans are not just fighting a war. They are building an alliance. Every species they free becomes loyal to them. If this continues, the balance of power in this galaxy will shift permanently. Elder Prel closed his ancient eyes and said nothing for a long time. Then he asked, "What do we do?" The council debated for days. Some wanted to assemble a grand coalition fleet to contain the humans before they grew too powerful. Others argued that attacking humanity now would unite the liberated species against the Union itself. Roka proposed a different approach. Reclassify humans, elevate their status, offer them a seat on the council. Give them power within the system, so they stop building power outside it. Nix was brought in as an advisor, the first Felmi to ever hold such a role. He listened to every proposal, and then shook his small head. You cannot contain them. You cannot buy them. You do not understand what drives them. He looked around the chamber at hundreds of alien faces. They do not want power. They do not want territory. They want someone to care about what happened to their people. That is all. That is everything. Nobody knew what to do with that. Aboard the Baiko, Tejo sat across from Warlord Tarn in the brig. The interrogation was quiet. No shouting, no threats, no violence. Just two beings, on either side of a set of bars, talking. Tarn was defiant at first. He called humans emotional weaklings. He said the victory at the Hollow was luck, nothing more. He said the Velshi would recover and crush them eventually. Tejo did not argue. He simply turned on a screen and showed Tarn footage from New Busan. Not the military footage, the personal footage. A video from a family's home camera showing a mother trying to shield her children when the first blast hit. A photograph of a classroom, half melted, with small shoes still lined up by the door. A single stuffed toy, burned on one side, pulled from the rubble by a rescue worker. Tarn looked away. It was just a raid, he said. His voice was quieter now. You were Tier 9. It was supposed to be nothing. Taeho leaned forward. 40,000 lives is not nothing. Not to us, not ever. Every single person in that colony had a name. They had families. They had plans for tomorrow. You took all of that because you looked at a number on a screen and decided we didn't matter. Tarn was silent for a long time. Then he said, "No species in the galaxy goes to war over sentiment." "We do," Taeho said. "That's the part you missed." The fleet reached the Velshi homeworld on a Tuesday. Nobody planned it that way. It just happened. Later, Hana would note that some of the most important moments in human history happened on the most ordinary days. The Velshi homeworld was a fortress. 80 warships guarded the orbital space. Defense platforms ringed the planet. Ground-based weapons bristled from every continent. The Velshi were preparing for a last stand, and they intended to make it bloody. Taeho called a war council. Every captain gathered on a secure channel, and the argument began almost immediately. Some wanted to bombard the planet from orbit, give the Velshi exactly what they gave New Busan, an eye for an eye, fire for fire. It was simple, it was fast, and a part of every human in that fleet wanted it. The rage was still there, burning in their chests, demanding payment. The debate was fierce. Voices rose. Some captains wept. Some shouted. One captain, whose sister had died on New Busan, said in a broken voice, "They burned our children. Why should we spare theirs?" The bridge of the Baiko was silent. Then Dowan spoke. Everyone turned to look at him. Dowan, the quietest man on the ship. Dowan, who had dragged Tarn from his burning flagship with his bare hands. Dowan, who carried a weapon he built for killing and had used it without hesitation. "If we burn their world," Dowan said, "we become them. I didn't fly across the galaxy to become them. I came here to make sure no one ever does what they did again. You don't do that by proving you can be just as cruel. You do that by proving you're better." The channel was quiet. Then, one by one, the captains voted. No orbital bombardment. They would destroy the fleet, disable the defenses, and demand surrender. If the Velshi refused, the humans would land and take the planet on foot, the hard way. Yuna, listening from the engine room, muttered, "Of course we're doing it the hard way." Nari grinned. "Would you want it any other way?" The battle of the Velshi homeworld was shorter than the Hollow, but it burned hotter. The Velshi fought like a species with nothing left to lose. They threw everything they had at the human fleet. Every ship, every weapon, every trick in their military history. And for a moment, the line held. For a moment, it seemed like the fortress might hold. Then Nari flew the Beko through a defense gap so narrow that Yuna later said she could have reached out and touched the orbital platform as they passed. 3 Velshi ships tried to follow her path and collided with each other, ripping a hole in the defense grid. Yuna, who had spent the entire approach welding a captured Velshi cannon to the Beko's hull with nothing but spare parts and stubbornness, fired it directly into the gap. The blast tore through 2 more platforms and opened the sky above the homeworld. And then Hana played her final card. She broadcast a recording on every Velshi frequency. Military, civilian, public, private. It was Tarn's voice, recorded in the brig. It was supposed to be nothing. The Velshi soldiers heard their own warlord dismiss the atrocity that had brought this war to their doorstep. And something broke inside them. The fleet shattered. The platforms went silent. The weapons powered down. Taeho broadcast his message to the planet below, in the Velshi language, with Hana's words and his own steady voice. "People of the Velshi, your warlord attacked our home without cause and killed our families without mercy. We came here not to destroy you, but to make sure you understand, this will never happen again. Surrender your military leadership, return the remains of our dead from New Busan, and know that from this day forward, The cost of human blood is more than any species can afford to pay. The planet was silent. Then, one by one, signals switched to the surrender frequency. First a few, then dozens, then hundreds. Hana, tears running down her face, whispered, "They're surrendering. It's over." Darwin put a hand on her shoulder. "No," he said gently. "It's just beginning." The surrender was quiet. There were no celebrations, no parades, no cheering crowds. The human fleet held position in orbit above the Velshi homeworld, and for a full day, nobody moved. The silence felt heavy, like the galaxy itself was holding its breath. Tarn was handed over to a joint tribunal made up of human and Union representatives. He did not resist. He stood in chains before a room full of species that had once feared him and said nothing. His compound eyes looked at the floor the entire time. The Union expected the humans to demand territory. They expected demands for wealth, resources, political power, control of Velshi space. Every species in galactic history that had won a war of this scale had taken something for itself. That was how the galaxy worked. The humans demanded three things. First, the full recovery of every body from New Busan. Every person, every fragment, every remain, returned with dignity and care. The Velshi would fund the search and recovery personally. Second, reparations, but not in money. Velshi engineers would travel to New Busan and help rebuild the colony, stone by stone, building by building with their own hands. They would build what their warships had destroyed. Third, a memorial on the Velshi homeworld itself, a permanent monument, built where every Velshi citizen could see it, bearing the names of all 40,000 dead. So that no Velshi, for the rest of their history, could ever pretend it didn't happen. That was all. No territory, no slaves, no tribute, no empire. The council chamber was silent for a very long time after the demands were read. Elder Prel, who had lived for 600 years and had seen empires rise and fall across the galaxy, said quietly, "In all my years, I have never seen a victor ask for so little and mean so much." Roka, the diplomat who had once filed the destruction of New Busan as a minor incident, stood before the council one final time. He was a different being than the one who had dismissed humanity months ago. His voice was steady, but there was something in it that sounded almost like shame. "We must reclassify the human species," he said. "I propose Tier 1, existential." The chamber erupted. Tier 1 was reserved for species that could threaten the existence of the Union itself. No species had ever jumped from Tier 9 to Tier 1. Several representatives argued it was an overreaction. Humans were strong, yes, but surely not that strong. Then he spoke again. "Every species in this Union fights for territory, resources, or survival. Humans fight for each other. You may think that is a weakness. It is the most dangerous trait in the galaxy. Because you can take a species' territory and they will negotiate. You can take their resources and they will adapt. But if you take their people, even one of their people, they will come for you, all of them, and they will not stop until the debt is paid." He paused. They did not come to conquer the Velshi. They came because 40,000 of their own were murdered. Imagine what they would do if the number were higher. Imagine what they would do if it were billions. The council voted. The result was not close. Humanity was classified as Tier 1, the highest threat level in the galactic record. The first species in history to make that jump. In the months that followed, the crew of the Baiko went their separate ways, though none of them ever truly left each other behind. Tejo was offered a permanent admiralship in the Terran Navy. He turned it down. He said he missed hauling cargo, which was half true. The other half was that he was tired of war and wanted to remember what peace felt like. He did accept a role as a human liaison to the Galactic Union, because someone had to make sure the galaxy never made this mistake again. He attended council meetings in his old cargo jacket, and nobody dared tell him to dress better. Yuna was recruited by 6 different alien species to consult on engine design. She accepted all 6 contracts at the same time, which caused an administrative disaster across half the Union. She didn't care. She was too busy making things go faster. He worked with the construction crews, human and Velshi alike, lifting beams and laying foundations in the same soil that had been ash. On the day the memorial wall was completed, 40,000 names carved in stone, facing the valley where the colony had stood. Dawan planted a tree beside it. A Korean pine, grown from a seed he had carried from Earth in his pocket through the entire war. He didn't explain why. He didn't need to. Hana became the most requested translator and diplomat in the Union. She was the first human to address the full Galactic Council. Her speech was 3 sentences long. We didn't want a war. We didn't want an empire. We wanted our people to be safe. That's all we've ever wanted. She received a standing ovation from 300 species. She didn't smile. She just bowed and walked out. Minho opened a medical exchange program between humans and alien species. He traveled to dozens of worlds, training doctors and sharing knowledge. On one trip, he performed emergency surgery on a Velshi patient, the first human doctor to ever do so. He saved the patient's life. The irony was not lost on him, but he did it without hesitation, because that was who he was. When a reporter asked him how he could save the life of someone whose species killed his people, he said, "Because being human means caring, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard." Nari was officially banned from 3 Union space lanes for reckless piloting. She framed the ban notices and hung them on the wall of her new ship. She considered them her greatest achievements. Nyx, the small Felny trader who had tried to warn the galaxy and been ignored by everyone, became an unlikely figure of fame. He published his report under the title, Humans, a Threat Assessment for the Willfully Ignorant. It became the most downloaded document in Union history. Every species read it. Every military academy taught it. Every diplomat memorized it. A Union media network interviewed him. They asked what the galaxy should learn from everything that had happened. Nyx, small and quiet, looked into the camera and spoke in his careful, measured voice. Humans have a saying, "Don't poke the bear." I spent 11 years living among them. I learned their languages, ate their food, watched their strange entertainments. They made me laugh. They made me feel safe. And I can tell you this, they are kind. Unbelievably kind. They will share their last meal with a stranger. They will mourn the death of a creature they have never met. They will cross a galaxy to help someone they have never seen. He paused. But that kindness has a price, because the same heart that makes a human cry over a lost animal is the same heart that will burn your fleet to ashes if you hurt their child. The galaxy made a mistake. It looked at humans and saw softness, but softness and weakness are not the same thing. They never were. 1 year after the war, New Busan was coming back to life. The settlement was small again, only a few thousand people, but it was growing. New buildings stood where craters had been. Gardens grew in soil that had been ash. Children played in a park that hadn't existed before the war. Velshi engineers worked alongside human construction crews. It was awkward. It was tense. Some days, someone on one side or the other would say something wrong, and the air would go cold, and everyone would remember. But they kept working, because that was the agreement, and because something fragile and important was being built alongside the buildings. Not friendship, not yet, but the beginning of understanding. Taeho came back for the memorial's anniversary. The whole crew did. They stood together at the Wall of Names, 6 people who had been nobodies on a cargo ship and had somehow changed the galaxy. Dawan's pine tree was small but growing. Its branches reached toward the light, like hands reaching for something they couldn't quite touch. A young Velshi engineer approached Taeho. She was nervous, her mandibles clicking softly, and she spoke through a translation device in a voice barely above a whisper. "Will your people ever forgive us?" Tejo looked at the wall. 40,000 names. He was quiet for a long time. The wind moved through the valley, carrying dust and the smell of new earth. "Forgiveness takes time," he said. "But we're here, building beside you, not over you. That's how it starts." The young Velshi looked at the wall too. Then she went back to work. That evening, Hana sat in her quarters aboard the Baiko, which was parked in its old spot at the colony landing pad, and recorded a personal log. She spoke softly, the way she always did when she was saying something that mattered. "The galaxy gave us a classification today. Tier 1, Apex Species, Existential Threat. They still don't get it. We were never the threat. We were the warning. Be kind to each other, because the universe is hard enough already. And if you can't be kind, at least don't be stupid enough to hurt the ones who are." She closed the log. She turned off the light. Outside the window, New Busan glowed softly in the darkness, small and stubborn and alive. Above it, human and alien ships moved together through a sky that belonged to everyone. And somewhere, far across the galaxy, an alien child opened a school textbook and read the first line of the first chapter of a history they were only beginning to understand. It said, "Do not anger the humans.